Zola, do you ever think about what Africa would look like in the next 50 or 100 years?
Africa? What's there to think about Africa? I mean, I'm here to figure out my life, not to talk of almighty Africa. Anyway, why do you ask?
Well, given the situation of Africa in the past, and I wonder if things would get better by then. You know, I read in the news that in some parts of Africa, people don't even have access to good schools, proper healthcare, and even basic amenities everyone should have.
50 years is a long time, but I believe things will be better then.
Me too. You know, sometimes I just wish I had the power to change things.
As African youth, we have the power to create the Africa we want.
My goods have been there for over 5 months. I haven't been able to trade because they've shut down the borders.
Wow, Charlie, you are still worried about your goods. My business has been shut down because of inadequate power supply. I wonder when we'll have steady power supply in this part of Africa, eh?
I wonder too. It's just so annoying.
We desire and demand an Africa that is peaceful and secure. An Africa where young and old, men and women, girls and boys from all walks of life are united in their diversity. An Africa whose growth and development are sustainable and inclusive, benefiting and bringing prosperity to all its citizens. An integrated continent, politically united, based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance. An Africa where good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law are the guiding principles of our societies. This is an Africa where we are confident in our identity, heritage, and culture, and shared values. Our very thriving Africa where young people contribute at all levels of society. And ultimately, an Africa which is an influential global player responsible for managing her resources and financing her peace and development. Let us unite to build the Africa we want. Visit www.au.int to learn more about Agenda 2063.
I really do think that we should, whoever is in the room, we should start because our VIP guests are here. Those who will be speaking in the opening session, we're asking everybody to be seated at a table, not on one of the peripheral chairs, please. So I'm going to invite you both up.
Picture this. It's February 1999. Pluto has regained its status as the outermost planet in our solar system, and NASA just launched the comet probe Stardust, which would return the first extraterrestrial sample to Earth. Meanwhile, on Tuesday the 23rd, at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa, postgraduate engineering students are about to watch the launch of their satellite, Sunsat-1, the very first to be designed and manufactured in continental Africa. Following this groundbreaking achievement, the space industry in Africa developed exponentially, with hundreds of millions of US dollars invested. More than 23 satellites were launched in the past 4 years alone, making 44 satellites at a grand total of over $4.5 billion. And according to the 2021 edition of the Africa Space Industry Annual Report, 125 new satellites are lined up for development in 23 African countries between now and 2025. To coordinate and manage Africa's growing space activities at a continental scale, the African Union eventually passed the 2017 African Space Agency Act. It remains the first and only legislation governing space activities in continental Africa and establishes the African Space Agency. The purpose of this agency is to lead, promote, and unify work in African space policy and strategy. It aims to support the African Union's Agenda 2063 for the socio-economic development of African countries by exploiting space technologies, applications for sustainable development, and citizen welfare improvement. The agency will be based in Egypt, who allocated $10 million in a bid granted by the African Union to host and establish these operations that are expected to be fully underway within the next few years. However, there are a number of challenges in the full implementation of this agency. Its status as an organ of the African Union Commission, rather than its own specialized agency with full political and financial autonomy, has caused some limitations. To overcome these obstacles and facilitate the growing space enterprise in Africa, increased national collaboration and independent capacity-building efforts will be vital. The African Space Agency Act does much more than establish the African Space Agency. It establishes a strongly planted foot in Africa's reach for the stars. It represents Africa's first practical step towards the advancement of their continent-wide space program and the peaceful, collaborated use of outer space. To learn more about the African Space Agency, head on over to spacetv.net for all the latest news. For Space TV News, I'm Deidre Ori.
Playing the Kenya national anthem anytime soon. Yep. Okay. Yes. Okay.
O God of all creation, blessed is the Let one and all arise. Let all with one accord.
Tree of life. And non-profit sector is one that complements JICA's strategy to be a global institution for the 21st century world. It's my hope that the seeds we plan today will bear fruit in the months and years to come in the form of increased entrepreneurship and startups and strengthened collaboration with industry, from research finance to curriculum development, guest lectures, and the internships or apprenticeships. I hope to see increased international collaboration between within African countries as well as Africa. I commend the Futures Forum for taking this first step in faith in the direction of transformation which, to example, where Chief Visionary Officer in the Futures Forum, the possibility of GIS and seeing the perspective of relation between organizations, seizing the moment to and continuous adaptation, including needs, this industry, collaboration with energy and industry will be essential to meet the demands of the vision 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my singular honor to declare the Space Futures Forum officially open. Thank you and God bless you.
Professor, I'd like to use this opportunity to Brigadier Hilary Kibukosgei, who is the acting executive officer of the Kenya Space Agency.
Thank you very much, Kwanza. Professor, sorry, apologies, Professor Kwanza. Our chief guest, the Vice Chancellor of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, represented by Dr. Kabugo, the convener and chief host of Ungana Space Futures Forum. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Yeah, let me first begin by thanking the organizers of Space Futures Forum 2023 for conceptualizing the idea of development of Oaseas, formerly Africa's Space Exploration Analog Simulation Initiative. This launch event towards Oaseas is an important first step which seeks to galvanize and involve those of us in this part of the world, Global South, to participate in analog space research ecosystem. Now, I did prepare some slides, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to display. Yes, if we can please go to the next slide. So my name is Brigadier Hilary Kibukosgei. I'm the Director General of the Kenya Space Agency. I will start by just briefly talking about the agency and what we seek to do. Our primary focus is enhanced utilization of space science and technologies for socioeconomic development. And of course, this has to be informed, and a great component of it is on research. And this needs to be buttressed by enabling national space capability. Towards this, education and mentorship is a very important aspect and an active ingredient in the activities that we do at the agency. We conduct space education and mentorship outreach programs to create awareness among our children and space, inspire interest among our children and the youth to take it geoscan as also as a stepping stone to fit careers in space sciences and technology. We also have active collaboration with universities. As a matter of fact, we collaborate actively with no less than 12 public universities through the research initiative. The purpose here is to enhance research, development, and innovations in space systems engineering, in space weather monitoring, and in application development. And the purpose here is that there is active industry and academia collaboration. And this initiative by Ugana's Futures Forum is because of great interest to us, and we are very keen to support it because it adds on to our efforts towards developing interest in research and development in this program. Next slide. So in my presentation, I have elected to share my thoughts on what I believe is needed to build foundational capacity in space to meet the AU 2060. And I believe, of course, that there are several requirements, but I will focus on only three for now. And these are as follows. Next slide. Yes, so I'll focus on three aspects. One of them is the development of institutional policy and legal framework as one of the key requirements. Secondly, leveraging beneficial partnerships nationally, regionally, and internationally. And thirdly, human and technical capacity building for sustainability. I acknowledge the incredible work that has been done by Ms. Rose Crocier. I see she's one of the speakers in one of the sessions here probably tomorrow. She's written a handbook for space capability development. And this makes a very interesting development in terms of steps that need to be taken in developing national space capability. And she calls it the technology ladder. And this is pretty much the work that most of the agencies take in developing national space capabilities. So we identify with the work. So I'll now go straight to the first point, which is the development of national institutional policy and legal framework. Please. So it is very important to have an entity that coordinates the national effort and programs for synergized implementation of the space program. And this entity also acts as the national focal point for linkage and collaboration. And there's also need for an institution of policy that clearly espouses the national goals and objectives that gives the orientation. So does the country want to do research in space purely for scientific, technological, ends? Is it for socioeconomic development, societal benefit, is it for military ends? Is it a mix of this? So policy framework will clearly stipulate that. And it forms the foundational document that informs the strategy, other plans and frameworks for the space. So what kind of architecture should the national look like? How do you segment civil space, commercial space, and defense? And how do you regulate? And the policy and institutional framework should also provide for mainstreaming of research, science, and technology and innovation, and including support for startups, which is very important in the private sector through innovation and acceleration programs. And it is also important to ensure that there is a sound legal framework that establishes the entity, ensures that it has the authority to coordinate and provide effective regulation of national space activities. What could be some of the metrics of success? Of course, this is of an industry policy framework that looks into all these elements, strategy, the existence of RSTI mainstreaming strategy, intellectual property policy, and research policy, coordinating entity or institution, and effective legal framework. So I'll quickly move to the second one, which is leveraging mutually beneficial partnerships. And of course, we appreciate, as pointed out, that in Africa we still have deficit in several sectors, infrastructure deficit in several sectors, including space. And the challenges we face in Africa are multifaceted, and they transcend transnational or rather national boundaries. They cannot be solved or addressed inside. So it means that cooperation is imperative. And the challenges brought up are, development of solutions or co-creation of solutions. And therefore, of course, this calls for a policy framework that actually fosters that collaboration. Partnerships and collaborations, not just within the nation itself, as we do with our colleges, but also extending that to the regional, in the case of Africa, and also international collaboration. And there are a number of engagements that have already taken place towards this end, mostly at the application side of things in systems engineering, but not much progress in terms of research. And that is an area that we definitely need to go into. And having Space Futures Forum, Ungana Space Futures Forum, as one of those initiatives to try and bring that people together is a very welcome move. Thirdly, I'll talk about human and technical capacity building as an aspect that builds long-term sustainability, not just in research and development, but also generally in space exploitation and exploration. So, third slide, please. Okay. One technical capacity, we have a number of, because we are not there yet, and obviously there is some challenges that progress. One being that space is a novel and complex in Africa. Of course, lack of adequate awareness of the sector, lack of critical mass, and lack of appropriate educational curriculum, especially at advanced level kind of training, low investments in relevant research and development. But very critical is the issue of international collaboration, especially with our Western partners who are only concerned with the commercial aspects of the cooperation. They just want to sell solutions. They want to sell products and services, but not so much when next slide, please. So obviously, we need to have concerted efforts to build capacities, include capacity building in domestic space capabilities through appropriate education and skills training and development of infrastructure. Participation in joint projects with regional and or international partners in the development of microsatellites. And we have seen a lot of benefits that we're able to derive from working collaboratively with partners who are facing the same context. whether it be within the region or the rest of the world, in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, and to some extent also in Asia. So we are saying that what should work is a partnership that benefits and also ensures that there is technology transfer, this capacity building. Encouragement of public-private partnerships in space science, technologies and applications, development of course, educational curriculum and facilities, and joint training opportunities, again, offer opportunities for,
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ngei Mutinda. Ngei Mutinda is the Senior Deputy Secretary. Minister is not there. Okay. Meshak. So we move to Meshak Kinywa, Davidu, from Space, who is a Space Education Officer, Africa Union.
Presentation to be projected. Maybe it's ready. Already established protocols, and my predecessor speaker, Brigadier acknowledging the Futures Forum, Space Forum, because Dr. Claire, you have worked so hard on this, and I think you deserve an applause for all that you have done, especially for choosing Africa as the main hub for this particular forum. I think you would have chosen somewhere else. There's a reason as to why you put it in Kenya as one of the countries in Africa to establish it. And as we talk, as you know, this week we are also having the African Union Summit that is going to happen. I think it's on 13th to 16th of this month, which is Wednesday, thereabout. And this is to, again, reinforce the need for bringing this kind of. I would like to dive into the presentation. I will just give you an overview. Okay. I would also like to thank heartily the Jomo Kenyatta University of Science and Technology. I really appreciate that you opened doors for us to gather here. I also want to acknowledge that Jomo Kenyatta University is actually I acknowledge that you host one of the institutes of the Pan-African University, which is as one of the key pillars in a space agency. We work with national space agencies to come with robust African space program.
Yes.
Kenya Space Agency has been very
Yes.
I also acknowledge all the other heads of national space agencies that are represented,
next slide.
either online or physically. So you may wonder why we thought about the African Outer Space Program. So back in 2013, there was a meeting of the African heads of state and government that gathered to look at the future, the next 50 years. And they crafted what we call the Agenda 2063. And it has 7 aspirations. The same period of time, there was a thought that African could be very beneficial to the enablement of this particular agenda. What happened is that experts gathered, ministers of science and technology gathered to request that there would be, a working group that should craft like a policy or a strategy or any other documentation that should create an African space program responding to the Agenda 2063. So what you see here is a map of the Agenda 2063, the goals and all the aspirations, as we call them, being mapped into the ecosystem of space. And when we look at space at a lens, it's actually responding to most of them. You also know that the SDGs themselves, there's a global acknowledgement that space is responding to almost all the 17 goals of the SDG, and so also in the Agenda 2063. So yes, we say let's form an African outer space program, but we have to start from somewhere. If you can go to the next slide, you will see the working group was formed. It was a representation of all the regional African entities or states. We have been able to, view Africa in different regions. There is the Central Africa, there is the Eastern African side, West African side, and Northern Africa. All of them have different mechanisms of managing them. We call them the regional economic communities, like Eastern African Community, ECOWAS, and so on and so forth. So out of all these regions, we selected people, experts that would craft an African space policy and strategy in response to the decision. And what happened is that within a period of about 4 years or so, the African space policy and strategy were ready. And those are key documents that are now guiding or acting as the compass to the African Outer Space Program. They respond to 4 main domains. There is, there is concentration in 4 main domains. There is the Earth observation, there is the satellite communication, navigation and positioning, and then there is astronomy and space sciences. And all these ones are this convergence of a lot of technologies nowadays that you don't actually treat them, and they are emerging, technologies that need to be taken into account in the policy and the strategy. So it started from January 2016 when the two documents were adopted by the head of state and government, and that action alone was to formalize the African Outer Space Program as one of the key pillars to achieve Agenda 2060. So just a highlight of the policy goals and the strategy is that we are looking at building a coordinated, a well-coordinated, integrated African outer space. There is a lot of energy, or there's a lot of potential when we come together to work in a coordinated manner. Fragmentation in itself doesn't amount to much of achievement, but having a coordination at the continental level will ensure whether the space agency is acting to develop a certain program, Nigerian space agency is acting to develop a particular program. Collaboration will bring alignment, and therefore we also need to take care of the regulatory framework. Hilary also mentioned about the regulatory framework. We are focusing on the space-derived products and services. And the key thing here is that we keep, the users or the people who use that service at the center of at the core of the development of these services. And this is very important because we're not engaging in space because it's, of course, it's fancy to go in space, but then we have also to look at the end goal. We are improving livelihoods, we are improving the communities that we are serving, and therefore we need to center all our interests to the users. An indigenous space capability, like it was highlighted by the speakers before, it's very important to build indigenous capability, and this cannot happen without capacity development and skill set revolution, as the agenda talks about. Actually, the Agenda 2063 refers to revolutionizing the skill sets of the STEM domain, which is relying in the space economy, whether you're talking about infrastructure or and this is important to ensure that Africa has that capacity, and not only having that capacity of building it, but also retaining that particular capacity. We have been facing issues of the brain drain, which is we act as factories of skill set, but then people go out and they start other regions and we don't benefit out of it. I think so this is very important to stress that international collaboration is very key. But that international collaboration has also to be that pillar of technology transfer, skill set mobilization, and so on and so forth. So if you go to the next one, so I can, there are many reasons why Africa is called the new era or the new focus for the global space economy. These are I'll give you the numbers shortly on how the economy is doing. But in the heart of digitalization, you see a lot of awakening in terms of digital trade or digital kind of economy in Africa, which is, the back end of that solution is cost space and connectivity networks that enable the digitalization to happen. So space is very key. We are facing issues like disaster action, security, which we need to ensure our people are well fed and therefore they are well protected also from the impacts of climate change, disaster risk, and so on. And space is a key enabler of all these. Some of these things they are in Agenda 2063, but they are also in the Sustainable Development Goals, meaning space together with the global movement of Well, I won't go through all the other slides because of time, but I hope we'll have enough time to actually interact with you. Jump like about 10 slides and then we can go to the African and the lunar economy, which is a good focus on the discussions here. You realize that the African space policy and strategy, they are a bit silent when it comes to the lunar economy. And I said, go to slide 27. The discussion here of the Omni-Africa space simulation is that if you look at it, it's towards the simulation of the lunar economy. And when you look at the African space policy and strategy, I think it's go further. Okay, slide 26 actually, 26. Yeah. 26. So if you look at the space strategy and the policy, they are a bit silent on the lunar involvement of Africa. But as I said, these are living documents that should be reviewed to reflect the emerging space domains like the lunar space, the lunar economy, which is a growing sector in space. The next slide, it's African, there's need for the review of the African space policy and strategy to ensure that these new emerging space domains are reflected into it, and to ensure that Africa is taking advantage of the existing and future technologies. We held one workshop on the in situ resource utilization, which is the usage of space resources without depending on the Earth. And the goal there was Africa has many ways of contribution, even though we cannot contribute in the high-end technologies or infrastructure. At least we have skill set that can be used. We are good in geology, we are good in mapping of resources. These are skills that are needed on the moon also to map resources and to create those catalogs that are needed for either companies to emerge or even the governments to take advantage of. Go to slide, I think it's slide, should be the second last. Starting. Yeah, so what can Africa offer in the lunar economy? There are skill sets, like I said, geology and remote sensing skills that are being used here on Earth. They can be very useful in the lunar economy. We can provide ground for analog missions in large inhabited deserts, and this is what is happening with Omni-Africa, the Oaseas program. I think soon after the conference there will be a visit to Marsabit to see how a lunar analog mission can be conducted there in a natural environment. A launching site, we have very good grounds for launching site on the equatorial tract and so on and so forth. Tracking infrastructure and the usage of the space services. Governance was highlighted by Brigadier, and I won't go into that. There's need for coordination and governance. The African Space Agency has been formed for this particular purpose to coordinate, the African space activities. And I think I will stop here by saying that, in order to drive this innovation, curriculum and training is very important, reinforcing the capacity. Private sector cannot be denied, and it needs to be brought into the attention of all the policymakers and the drivers of space, particularly to ensure that they are developing services that are improving on the livelihoods of people. And we need to also come up, fundamental and applied research and development services, which now brings the academia into the perspective of contributing to the space economy. So I'd like to thank you very much, and I would also like to highlight that the African Union Commission is happy to be invited and to support this mission as one of the indicators of Africa taking the next step to ensure that we are not left behind in the next space age. Thank you so much.
For your presentation. I'm sorry, I think there are some slides which you could skip because of time. Can we give him another clap?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mesha. I think we can take a few minutes for questions and answers. Very a very short time. We had the first presentation from Brigadier Hilary Koskei from Kenya Space Agency, and he brought much on the level framework, the institutional foundations, and so on. And now Nashak has taken us through what they are doing in the African Union towards supporting space activities. So members, the floor is open for you to ask questions. Any question? I am a teacher, and when you teach, the students are not asking.
Space sector. So now I haven't heard whether they are
is responsible for revolutionizing the private sector and ensuring that there is funding to programs. But there are still some steps to its full operationalization, which has not happened. We believe that in the next 1 or 2 years, the space agency will be up on its feet. But going further, we also inject some projects at the departmental level. One of the projects that also was highlighted by Brigadier was the GMS in Africa, which is, I mentioned that it's organized in a consortium. It brings public institutions, academic sector together to co-design, co-develop services. For now, it's working on Earth observation as a collaboration between Europe and Africa. And the fund goes to the leader of each of the consortia. We have about 8 of them. And then the distribution happens within that. Next few years, we can also be able to pull other projects to inject them into different domains, not only Earth observation. The model of the African Space Agency is that it should be funded by member states. Normally the African Union has a contribution by all the member states, and from that pool, the African Space Agency should be funded. But due to the huge budget of the African Space Agency, we also foresee international collaboration. So in the next few years, we should be able to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just add what we're doing in a small way. So at the agency, obviously, the budget is a constraint, but we've taken deliberate efforts to allocate not less than 10% of our budget, to R&D and also innovation. So that is a commitment, a standing commitment at the agency. We've also come up with a resource mobilization strategy, which we've just recently developed, and it seeks to identify resource partners, not just on the financial side of things, but also other resources that can be shared, or opportunities for development, whether it is in systems development, through projects, and that's what we are trying to leverage on as a way of mitigating the constraints. But thank you.
Thank you very much for those responses about funding. Another opportunity for a question, and once yes,
My question is, some of the challenges we have in our continent is the government providing, infrastructure, healthcare, food on the table, housing, security, and other things. Maybe what is the attitude of our governments in support of this, this idea? Because does it look too far or something we can use and apply and be able to help us in our economies? I don't know, at your level, maybe from the idea to African Union, maybe you interacted with governments. At the end of the day, the African Union is funded by the governments, local facilities by local governments. I don't know what your experience.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, that is a constant challenge, and I believe also a lot needs to go in terms of creating the necessary awareness so that there is buy-in and appreciation of the value that we can derive from space exploration and exploitation. So we try, as a way of trying to get the buy-in, we look at those projects that have a direct relationship with the problem sets that we face, and principally in the socioeconomic sectors. So solutions targeted at agriculture and food security, environmental monitoring, natural resources management. If we are able to create that connection and demonstrate the value that we derive from it, then we get more buy-in, and we have seen progressively that there is now that realization, and we are seeing some positive support from the ministry and by extension from the National Treasury. So I think there is good progress there. Thank you.
I also have a general question, and Claire and other people here from outside Africa. Perhaps you can help me understand. My question is, there is the issue of drones, and drones are used very much in agriculture, especially where just, for example, to spray pesticides. But then there is the other issue, the legal part and the security part, in that space needs to be controlled so that we don't have so many things flying in space and they may collide, cause accidents and so on. Again, there is the security element. But I understand in America and Europe, that technology is very much in use. Here in Africa, in Kenya, we have a bit of challenges. You cannot just fly your drone anyhow. They have many limitations. You can, unless, isn't it the case that you people, when it comes to that, So how have you managed those because it's also about space. And Meshach told us you develop capacity and make use of that capacity. So we work on solutions for space and use the technologies to address the problems that we are facing. So I don't know whether you have any comment on that.
I'll attempt to answer that question. It's not directly under the purview or responsibility of Kenya Space Agency, even we have that word space, because our concern is above 100 kilometers. So the responsibility for regulating drones, licensing and authorization is actually vested with the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. And for obvious reasons, security being one of them, Kenya Air Force is also enjoined in those applications. So there has to be a demonstration that that drone is going to fly in only a limited, restricted, or rather an area that is understood and will not obviously interfere with other aviation. So that is an aspect that is handled by Kenya Civil Aviation, and I cannot comment beyond that. I think that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know how we are doing in terms of time. Time is up, and that's what I'm being told. So, Nikki, can I hand over to you now? Tell us what.
Okay, thank you for all the speakers, all the protocol observed. So thank you very much for that first session. I think we now want to have a group photo. Then now we can release some of the guests who will be attending to other matters.
Thank you.
So I propose we have a group photo just outside the reception.
That's group photo for the head table.
I think everyone, yes.